Hello, everyone. I'm John Coleman from ApocatastasisInstitute, an Institute for the Humanities, an alternative college and high school here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. The purpose of this broadcast is to get the September 2025 edition of Christian History and Ideas under our belt. And we have entitled our time together Art as the Last Frontier, and it is, in fact, the title of this month's article, Focus. And the article appears, as it often does, always does, at least the primary article, from the Postil online magazine. Our article for this month is down below in the description. Before we get too long in the tooth, let's set up the tech here. We'll have some nice relaxing music in the background. We'll have an advertisement, and then we'll be off to the races. So let me get my screen share up. And indeed, we have entered this beautiful semester. We call it the autumn semester, though it's still very much the summer here in Connecticut. Beautiful weather in this part of the world this time of year. And indeed, the semester's back on, and so is the tie. So I'm just as happy as you are for that, although it was good to take a little bit of a break there, to be a little bit more informal, not too much. This is the painting we have for the thumbnail, as well as the introductory image, and it is an artist's attempt to encapsulate God, the creator. God as creator, and looks rather influenced by William Blake and his art style. I don't think it's quite Blake. Blake drew bodies a little bit different, but something of the abstraction, something of Blakean abstraction appears here. You can see the angels and all the wings and so forth, and that attempt to depict Ezekiel is just as good as yours. So, all right. So that's the image there. God is creator. We're looking at art. Our main article, indeed, is art as the last frontier against the artificial illusion. And then as time allows, we're going to have St. John Paul II's letter to artists from 1999. My goodness, I was thinking that today, how long that was ago. I was reading another book and thinking about the 1990s. All right, but indeed, you are going to get your advertisement, and appropriate to our time together and who is likely watching this, I would like to inform you that at Apocatastasis, we have a whole course, a whole enrolled course called Christian History and Ideas. And we get into the various topics that we bring up here, for instance, in this public series, in a lot more depth. So if you enroll in this class formally, this private class formally, Christian History and Ideas, which you can find about on our course catalog. This is the PDF that you can see on our main page. If you enroll in this course, there'll be additional readings, dialogue, as well as lecture in class, writing assignments, and indeed evaluations to make sure that our knowledge is building one concept upon another. And so I would encourage you to consider enrolling in that course, Christian History and Ideas. And then whether or not you enroll, we warmly invite you to join us online during the week for the Divine Office. And if you go to our site at the top, you'll see all of these drop downs, and then towards the public there's one called Liturgy and Devotions. And should you go there, you will see our Divine Office schedule, as well as especially the link, the stable link you will need to join us. So whether or not you ever enroll with us, we would most dearly welcome your prayer power. The more people we can get praying together, the more powerful is our spiritual warfare. So there you go. And now here we go. Art as the Last Frontier by Santiago Mondayar Flores on September 1st, 25. This was published. Let's find out about our author. These are previous articles, and we learn that Santiago is a consultant, lecturer, and columnist on geopolitics and international political economy. Okay, now many articles on the Postil are translated, and if I'm going to be presumptuous, given the gentleman's name, I reckon that this article was also translated, very likely, from Spanish. Next thing we want to look at is the art chosen by the editors of the Postil. And down below, we learn that this is Venus and the Three Graces presenting gifts to Giovanna degli Giovanna degli Albizzi by Sandro Botticelli in the 15th century. So there you go. The Three Graces there presenting gifts to herself. Now, I should say, in terms of housekeeping with the Postil, as of last month, they have announced their desire to go more into book publishing. So that is something we can expect and look forward to from them. And there are only so many hours in the day, and resources in other regards are limited. And so they will be giving less attention to preparing articles. So as we can see, new articles are posted on the site, plenty to take up a month, but not as many as before because of the shift into physical media. Here we go. As you know, we're going to read a bit and jabber a bit, and then we will not forget St. John Paul II's letter to artists. Let's put all of this in the context of our technological drunkenness that we're about. We will see that there is something about art which will keep us human in the maelstrom of the digital onslaught. Here we go. Since emotions, rather than sense data, are lived experiences, only a human being can awaken an authentic emotion in another human being. This assertion, which might once have seemed self-evident, has today become a radical stance in the face of a cultural horizon dominated by mechanical reproductions, generative algorithms, and hyper-realistic simulations. Thus, art emerges as the last frontier of the human. A lot of talk about event horizons and singularities when it comes to technology. Well, how about this? Art emerges as the last frontier of the human, that irreducible domain where every imitation dissolves into its own falsehood, and every substitute conceals the truth of being. Every substitute conceals the truth of being. And now we enter into a stretch in this article. We don't read all the articles in this series, as you know, or all the words in every article, pardon. We don't read every word. So I leave it to you to get the full gusto and the full breadth of this article. But nevertheless, we now enter into a stretch where the author, Mr. Flores, brings up points from various traditions: the Islamic, the classical, the Christian, the secular, modern, and they're all, centered basically around the same truth. There is ultimately something that transcends culture and creed when it comes to art, which is why it will be the anchor and the one thing that's irreducible, to use the author's word. So in the Principles of Art from 38, R.G. Collin will distinguish his true art from inferior forms such as craft, magic, or entertainment. For him, quote, art does not consist in the discharge of emotion, nor in the contagion of emotion. To express is to clarify a confused emotion through its form. Just to clarify, it is not to discharge, neither to contain, or to express. This means that authentic art is neither communication nor mere stimulation, but a process through which emotion, in finding its form, becomes conscious of itself. Right? So notice our reference here, R.G. Collingwood, inherently, says that pop art, so-called, is not art. It's not entertainment. Entertainment is not art, because modern mass entertainment is meant to merely stimulate. Mostly to stimulate your hand, taking money out of your wallet and giving it to advertisers. That's at the end of the. That's the brass tacks of it all. The artist discovers what he or she feels in the act of creation itself. It is in that creative action that affect is shaped. Affect with an A. Art is therefore an act of affective self-knowledge, inseparable from consciousness, reflectivity, and embodiment. No machine can genuinely express what it has never lived. So all of you with AI girlfriends and boyfriends and friends, remember that. No machine can genuinely express what has never lived. A machine can't live. The fact that you have people, and we roll our eyes, and it gets clicks because now it's eccentric, but don't worry. Digital so-called friendships will increase and become normalized, but they will not be friendships because the machine has never lived. No machine can genuinely express, we read, what it has never lived. It can spit back dead data, and we can be so bugged out and removed from reality that we mistake this for the real McCoy. But it never still will be a genuine expression of life. No neural network can incarnate the intimate vibration of a beating heart, nor the tremor of a hand hesitating before drawing a definitive line. For this very reason, any work produced by artificial systems, even if capable of deceiving the senses, is at best an exercise in Platonic mimesis, a copy of a copy. It's funny, if you know me somewhat personally, or if you just follow these channels of the Institute, you notice I have a great love for folk music, and the AI machines are able to, well, first of all, they're able to give almost studio quality productions to works, very very cheaply. What's the word for that? Very cost efficiently, I guess. And there are songs I'm hearing, so-called folk songs, that are AI, and they're the people who own these channels are very upfront about that, and yet it is mimesis here, as they say, a copy of a copy, and some of that you can tell because of the somewhat hackneyed phrases and overused phrases, and sometimes things that don't make sense, like black streets. I've noticed that in some of this AI Irish folk art and British folk music. And I've played around with AI poetry myself, and you'll notice that you will get these loops that don't quite make sense. When I was playing around with the poetry, I was constantly coming up with the expression where shadows dance and play. And once or twice is okay, but it was coming up rather often. Or people have noticed more generally that the word delve, to delve as a verb, to dig, an old word for dig is to delve, that appears in a lot of academic AI so-called writing, to delve. So it is interesting, those little hangouts. But more importantly, this folk music, etc., is a copy of a copy. As Plato reminded us, mimesis is not knowledge, but semblance, and images that depart from truth as the shadows in the cave depart from the light of the sun. This mistrust of the visible that fascinates but does not illuminate is not unique to Plato. And whilst this is Christian history and ideas, we now have an interesting point about the Dajjal, which is a type of Islamic antichrist figure. And just for background knowledge, one of the distinctive things that the Muslims believe about the Dajjal is that he has one eye. He has one eye. So if you're a Muslim guy and you're really into conspiracy theories, you really go gaga goo goo over this because of all the one-eyed symbolism in Western occult, or at least pop occult breadcrumbs, let's say, not the least of which is the one eye on the dollar bill, and go from there. Interestingly, that snippet about the Dajjal having a one eye was the contribution Muhammad made. Muhammad was asked, "Can you tell us about the Antichrist?" And he spent the rest of the day basically recounting what he would classify as his fellow prophets, his brother prophets before him had spoken about this figure. And then at the very end, he says, "That is what other prophets have said, and I will tell you something proper. And the Dajjal will have one eye." So anyway, that's a big thing here, and we can just use that as a poetic or how do you say, a archetypical point. So here we go. The Islamic worldview expresses it with singular intensity in the figure of the Dajjal, the apocalyptic symbol of the supreme seduction of the illusory. He who creates an entire world of convincing illusion, wherein the false is livid as true. In this sense, Dajjal is not merely an eschatological figure, but also a cultural archetype, pointing to the danger of a civilization that confuses the simulated with the real. Now we go from early medieval Islamic timing to Jean Baudrillard in the 1960s, 70s. Jean Baudrillard, a French philosopher, from a different philosophical standpoint, radicalized this intuition. In contemporary hyper-reality, the simulacrum, a copy which has no original, is the meaning of the simulacrum, does not merely conceal the real, it replaces it. The simulacrum does not conceal the real, it replaces it. That's why in the world of education, a lot sooner than you know, that's going away. Formal education, public school, private school, colleges, homeschool for the mass of the population is going away. It will be replaced with simply job certification with some training attached, some basic slave training attached, and people will be very happy because after 100 years of the degree symbolizing an education, people don't really care about the actual education anymore and haven't for ever and a day. All they want is the simulacrum. In fact, they don't even want the degree. They just want the alleged employment that the degree will give them. So all of that, you don't have to waste your time with an education. You don't even have to waste your time with the degree. You just need the slave training. You can see I'm going back and forth on the word job or slave. We'll go with slave. You just want the slave training so you can be a slave adult and your children can follow in their slave parents' footsteps. And that's the simulacrum. That's where formal education, not just public school, by the way, that's where it's going very, very quickly, because the population really doesn't care about formal learning. What they care about are the social baubles. And enough of them don't care now that they're not conscious, they're not self-conscious about that way of thinking. So that's a simulacrum. All people want is the simulacrum. There's so many other examples. The Dajjal's single eye may be reinterpreted as a metaphor for a reduced binocular vision, incapable of perceiving ontological depth. The result is a gaze that no longer requires reality, for it has created an autonomous world of signs referring only to themselves. In this realm, the veil converting reality is not a mere concealment, it is a total replacement. Yet the word veil retains its etymological sense of threshold, a place where the desire to see and the impossibility of apprehending the absolute intertwine. Art lives precisely from this tension. Let's go back there. The veil is a sense of threshold. It is a place, a veil, where the desire to see and the impossibility of apprehending intertwine. Art lives precisely from this tension. This is why you cannot have AI art. You can have AI entertainment, you can have AI images, you can have AI comedy, superficially. Even there, we could probably have a whole other show about that. But you cannot have AI art because the AI is simply, and digital stuff, you cannot have digital art, whatever. The digital stuff just is referring to itself. It's referring to itself. It only has the images that themselves are copies, often of other images that are copies. And by the time it gets into the computer, it's at least once or twice removed. Sometimes, as I say, many times over removed. That's all this computer has to work off of. Right? This threshold reality is something proper to the human. And then we read from the classical world, Heraclitus expressed this in his Physics Cryptici of Filiae. Nature loves to hide. And Heidegger, reading Heraclitus, held that all truth involves a process of concealment. In this sense, artistic truth is not conceptual adequatione hiet intellectus, but symbolic revelation, and a hearing that does not close off mystery, but preserves it and makes it habitable. Now we want to make time for St. John Paul II, so as we often do, we'll just go to the very end here for Mr. Flores's closing words, and then we'll take a brief break and then hear from the late Pope. Anyhow, closing up on this Postil article, Nietzsche, so many traditions here quoted. Nietzsche, by contrast, rejects the idea that art should function as an ontological sedative. For him, the work is not a refuge from suffering, but a symbolic space in which suffering is transfigured into form and affirmed as inseparable from life itself. Art does not mirror the world, it produces it. And neither represents nor replicates what is given, but founds new ways of inhabiting it. It precedes concept, morality, and theory, an originary gesture, the symbolic matrix of meaning. Its value lies not in transparency, but its capacity to condense the ineffable into a sensible form, to coexist with mystery without trivializing it artificially. Concluding, in an age saturated with technological artifice, art endures as the last redoubt of the human. It is the space where mystery is not suppressed but given form, where the veil does not conceal to deceive but preserves to reveal. It may well be the only place where truth, like the Pieta artwork, like the Pieta nested in the marble, still awaits intact to be set free. Tu autem Domine miserere nobis, Deum gratias. Thus is art as the last frontier against the artificial illusion, by Santiago Maria Flores, September 25, from the Postil magazine. That is our introduction. It remains for you, dear audience, to click the link below and read the full breadth of this piece. Now, we're going to take a brief break, and I'll be back in a minute as we get into St. John Paul II's letter to artists, where he will, from a Christian point of view in particular, elaborate on these aspects. So let's just cue himself up, have a little background music at a higher rate, and we'll be right as rain. And we are back, everyone. So, I need about three assistants to do all the work here, and I had to run across the room just now and check on another video that's uploading. So, thank you for that patience. And now we can get into the last stretch of this September 25 look at art is the last frontier. Now with St. John Paul II's letter to artists. Interesting to see how these documents are addressed. They begins to all who are passionately dedicated, like all the audience of Christian history and ideas, to the search to follow for new epiphanies of beauty, so that through their creative work as artists, they, you and I, may offer these gifts to the world. And we begin with a quote from Genesis, quote, "God saw all that he had made, and it was very good," unquote. Read a few bits here, and hopefully you and I will go and read the full document and really meditate on both what our author, Mr. Flores from the Postil, and the late Pope has to say. None can sense more deeply than you artists, ingenious creators of beauty that you are, something of the pathos which God at the dawn of creation looked upon the work of his hands. A glimmer of that feeling has shone so often in your eyes when, like the artist of every age, captured by the hidden power of sounds and words, colors and shapes, you have admired the work of your inspiration, sensing in it some echo, here we go, of the mystery of creation, some echo in the work of the artist, some echo in the mystery of creation with which God, the sole creator of all things, has wished in some way to associate you. So there's a vocation. We see that the artist, by the mystery of their vocation, is associated with the mystery of the creator God. That is why it seems to me that there are no better words than the text of Genesis with which to begin my letter to you. Once again, God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. To whom I feel closely linked by experiences reaching far back in time, and which have indelibly marked my life. In writing this letter, I intend to follow the path of the fruitful dialogue between the Church and the artists, which has gone on unbroken through 2,000 years of history, and which still, at the threshold of the third millennium, offers rich promise for the future. In fact, this dialogue is not dictated merely by historical accident or practical need, but is rooted in the very essence of both religious experience and artistic creativity. Why? Why? Okay, why is there a dialogue between the church and the artists for all these centuries? Because, getting to Flores' article, we're going to go back to it, the idea of the veil. Let me do a word search here. I believe I'm locked into the Pope's. What have I got here? I'm pretty yeah. So I locked into that, so I don't have the screen share that I can change easily. Okay, but veil, right? Remember what Flores said? In this realm, the veil covering reality is not a mere concealment; it is a total replacement. Yet the word veil retains its etymological significance of threshold, a place where the desire to see and the impossibility of apprehending the absolute intertwine. Okay, so why does the church, John Paul II, why does the church have a dialogue with artists? Because this veil, this limbus, this marsh, whatever, where it's both things, the threshold is the word, the desire to see and the possibility of apprehending it exists. That's why you have this, because you're dealing with mystery. The artist, laid out now for the last half hour, is dealing with this mystery, and obviously the church is in its own way. The opening page of the Bible, singular, presents God as a kind of exemplar of everyone who produces a work. The human craftsman mirrors the image of God as creator. One of the gentlemen I've interviewed a couple of times is Levi Pingleton, who is very interested in Christian cosmology, and he often will use an icon of God the Creator, and it has God with a compass, an architect's compass. Right, so God is Creator. This relationship is particularly clear in the Polish language because of the lexical link between the words creator and craftsman. What is the difference between creator and craftsman? The one who creates bestows being itself. He brings something out of nothing. Ex nihilo sui et subjecti, as the Latin puts it. And this, in the strict sense, is a mode of operation which belongs to the Almighty alone. The craftsman, by contrast, uses something that already exists, to which he gives form and meaning. Interesting that in the Flores article from the Postil, that the author made that distinction as well. Art as different from craft, as different from entertainment, etc. We have a same distinction here. The craftsman, indeed, gives form and meaning. So, once again, the creator gives being itself. The craftsman gives form and meaning to being which is already in existence. This is the mode of operation peculiar to man, as made in the image of God. In fact, after saying that God created man and woman, quote unquote, in his image, the Bible adds that he entrusted to them the task of dominating the earth. This was the last day of creation. On the previous days, marking it, as it were, the rhythm, the birth of the cosmos, Yahweh had created a universe. Finally, he created the human being, the noblest fruit of his design, to whom he subjected the visible world as a vast field in which human inventiveness might assert itself. Looking at the liturgy at Vespers on ferial days, and Vespers and ferial days outside of privileged seasons, we have these beautiful hymns, and each hymn coincides with the day of creation. And so, and it parallels Genesis. What God created on the Sunday and the Monday and the Tuesday and the Wednesday parallels with how Genesis lays out the 7 days of creation. And so we see that focus in the Holy Liturgy of creation. And in fact, one of the preces, one of the intercessions in the present Liturgy of the Hours, explicitly is for artists to link up their vocation with the creative energy of the Most High for the benefit of mankind. That's not the wording in the liturgy, but it is the sentiment. God, therefore, called man into existence, committing him to the craftsman's task. Through his artistic creativity, quote unquote, man appears more than ever in the image of God, more than ever through artistic creativity. And he accomplishes this task, above all, in shaping the wondrous material of his own humanity, and then exercising creative dominion over the universe which surrounds him. With loving regard, the divine artist passes on to the human artist a spark of his own surpassing wisdom, calling him to share in his creative power. Obviously, this is a sharing which leaves intact the infinite distance between the creator and the creature, as Cardinal Nicholas of Cusa made clear, and we'll end it on this quote: creative art, which is the soul's good fortune to entertain, is not to be identified with that essential art, which is God himself, but is only a communication of it and a share in it. Unquote. So there's much to meditate here in the general input from many traditions, and we got that from the Postil, for example, the Christian, the postmodern, the Islamic, the modern secular. We had input in all of that. And then here explicitly with the letter from John Paul II, painted, to artists, looking especially, appropriate to our series, at the Christian paradigm of the artist. So as we begin the autumn semester, the canvas of the classroom here in Connecticut, for some of you will be in school or your children will be in school, I encourage you Do indeed see the school day, whether that's public school, private school, homeschool, college, preschool, whatever. Uh, Take an artistic mind to that. Try to see the classroom and the time in the classroom as an artistic space in the way perhaps an actor does. John Paul II reference obliquely is acting past. If we're going to, and we will, preserve the best of the classroom, the best of the magic of the classroom, we really must take an artist's eye to it and see it as a medium, or as I keep saying, a canvas as an example of a medium, or a theatrical stage that's a medium of its own, just as much as marble or plastic or wood or whatever the case may be. So let us see that and appreciate that liminality that we got, especially in the Postil's article, though echoed by John Paul II's letter to artists. So, with that, I am up on my duties here at the Institute. I must lead the prayers this midday as we conclude our recording, and I would just use these closing moments to invite you to enroll in the Institute. If you're really uh, intrigued by this series, Christian History and Ideas, that enrolled class is definitely your cup of tea. So it's a full class enrollment, 16 weeks, and reading assignments, writing assignments, and lots of discussion privately between other students and our staff. And then, regardless of that, do join us in person. In person if you're in Connecticut, or online for the Divine Office. The more we can pray, the more powerful and loud is our petition and our praise of the Most High. So, that being said, thank you so much, and I wish you masalama, varete, arrivederci.